Hey guys, welcome back from one of the worst top 16 qualified players to another worst top 16 qualified player and Fight Night winner as well. Welcome, Aikado. How are you doing, my guy?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being around. I mean, you have been with us in Discord for a long time now as well, and it's nice to get people get some exposure because they're damn decent players, especially with Cameron, with which you have a history kind of in terms of tournaments. Like, how do you keep beating him in every tournament he joins? What's
I mean,
happening?
it's wild that we keep running into each other, right? Like in the top 32 at the seasonals, we ran into each other in the second round. In the top 64, the qualifiers for Worlds, we ran into each other, and thank goodness, at least in fight night, we ended up avoiding each other. He kind of dropped out pretty quickly, but every time I run into him, I've just had favorable matchups, and thank goodness. But I imagine the next couple times we run into each other will probably go his way.
You know, you can have this kind of strategy in grassroots tournaments, for example. Just change your username, don't tell him it's you, so he joins and he doesn't know.
That's smart. I no, see, I actually just decide my lineups based on what counters his, just in case I run into him, right?
Really? Okay. It's good to know. Probably it's gonna be good to know for him too. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, no,
you are a familiar face for me, but not for many people. So could you tell us a bit about yourself, like what you're doing outside of LOR, what you're doing IRL?
I mean, I just work, right? Like that's what I do IRL. I'm customer service popping off.
Hmm.
Other than that, like, as far as like a background with card games, I haven't played a ton competitively. Like I played Yu-Gi-Oh when I was a kid, right? But my competitive background's in like League of Legends, where I played on some amateur teams, but nothing real, right? So yeah,
Hmm.
LOR's kind of the first like big card game that I've done well in.
How did you get to pick up LOR? Like, was it just by chance or were you in the market for some card game?
I think I was pretty done with League. I think anybody who's played League for a long time just sort of gets to a point where you're just kind of done playing it. And a couple of my friends were playing LOR, so I figured I'd try it out. And I hit Masters within like 2 weeks. It was back when TFIz came out, so I just kind of abused that to Masters. And after that, I was like, hey, I'm okay with this game. Maybe I'll spend time playing it.
And then all of a sudden, yeah, maybe I'm going to make a top 4 seasonal. Yeah, maybe I'm qualifying in top 16 in Worlds. Yeah, maybe I'm gonna win it. Oh, who
Yeah,
knows?
maybe. It's been an okay investment of time. Yeah.
Mhm. But what keeps you still in the game? Like, you picked it up because you were done with League, but what keeps you still playing a lot?
I mean, I think a lot of it is just, it's something that I, picked up pretty well. Something I've obviously had, a modicum of success with, right? And it's something I enjoy more than anything. Um, anyone who's played League for a long time, they absolutely hate actually playing the game. LOR, I actually enjoy playing. So, I've been competitive myself. So any sort of a game that I'm able to do well competitively and actually enjoy playing it, I'm pretty happy to play.
I'm kind of the same, like, you are casually playing the game and then you realize, damn, this has a ladder or rank mode. I now need to grind. Shit.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, you won the last fight night and you have a pretty nice record going into Worlds. Like, how do you keep putting up these performances lately? Did anything change or did you start playing competitively more?
I mean, I don't know. I've just been running really hot for the last like month and a half, going back to seasonals. I think if you count like my seasonal open rounds plus the top cut plus the world's qualifiers, I'm like 20-2 in match history.
Wow.
Oh, and the fight night. Um, yeah, I've kind of been running really hot right now. I think that it's a combination of just a lot of decks that I'm pretty comfortable with being pretty good within the meta. And also I kind of buckled down and started spending more time practicing. I got some really strong practice partners, and I've put in a lot of time scrimming and such. And I think that's really paid off.
Hmm. Alright, so you are not only built different, there are people that help you be built different. That's nice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, see, I started scrimming with Cameron Hanzo, and suddenly I top 32 to seasonal, and then I started scrimming with Duckling, and suddenly I top 2 to seasonal, right? And then of course, Grandpa Roji I've been scrimming with for a few months, and I think that having really strong people to test with has been really important for helping me to get where I am.
Mm-hmm. All right, but let's see what text did you bring to the table. First and foremost, you brought Demacia, Ionia. This is a classic, still living since the last meta. It just got a little bit adapted. So why was it still good, or what was the meta call for this one? Why did you bring it to the tournament?
Yeah, I've just played more Lulu Poppy than anything else on the ladder this season. Um, and I like the Ionia version just because Young Witch is a broken card and you get to rerun Twin Discipline. A lot of people are on like the Bandle City version. I just haven't had the same success with it. Um, but yeah, I brought it to Worlds and it did pretty well. So I was like, oh, we can just run it back at Fight Night. It does pretty well into like Nami Zoe. And it kind of has the high roll potential to just beat anything. Um, which is always pretty nice.
Did you have something in mind when you took this one to Fight Night? Like, did you want to target something specifically or be strong into something specifically?
Yeah, no, I wanted to be strong into Nami Zoe. I was like, Nami Zoe's the best deck of the format. People are gonna bring it. I want to be good against it. Um, and nobody brought it. So I was kind of I was kind of worried when they released the deck list because there was exactly zero Zoe Nami players. So yeah, no, it turned out well. Obviously, I was able to kind of high roll my way there, but there's a lot more plunder than I was expecting, and it's an okay matchup for this deck because you can just kind of like rally on him a few times and beat him. But I was a little scared when I saw none of the deck that I was trying to target.
Hmm. I mean, most of the decks in this meta, if you agree with me, kind of want this setup. Even Draven Sign, they want some setup to kill you on turn 7. Even Zoe Nami, they need setup. Kind of everything wants some room. Like, but you cannot kill me on turn 6 or 7 if I'm killing you on turn 4.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if you curve right and just have the rallies, have the protection, then a lot of times you are killing people on like turn 5, turn 6 before they really get their stuff online. There's a few like Bandle City decks that can keep up with you and like maybe beat you before then, but for the most part, if you're curving well, you can beat pretty much anything with this deck.
Mhm. We have seen people adopting this new version with Poppy. Have seen some people that are still onto the Z list. So why would you vouch for Poppy over the Z in this list?
I didn't really play Zed, but I think Zed's better into like the control decks. He's much more of a self-sufficient threat, right? He very much demands removal when he comes down, and if you don't have a board, Zed can still do things. Whereas like Poppy needs a board, but when she comes down, she's much stronger, I think. Even if you attack with her once, she just can kind of end the game. She's incredibly difficult to deal with. And I think that she's a lot better into like the Zoe Nami style decks because once you get like one or two buffs, once you like rally, I feel like she just puts on more pressure on those types of decks than Zed actually will.
Speaking about pressure, you went full in with the rally effects. Double relentless percent, double, not double, triple relentless percent, triple golden ages. I think the usual ratio is 3 relentless to golden ages. Why the additional golden ages? What does it bring to the table?
I just want the consistency of hitting rallies every single game. Demacia decks historically have a lot of trouble ending the game if they're not rallying, right? So I think having the 6-1 means I can always mull them away, and I know I'm going to hit more, right? Like I'm always going to be drawing into rallies, and it makes my top decks really good throughout the game. I feel pretty confident that I'm not going to run out of steam. If I keep a board, I'm going to draw into rallies eventually and have a way to end the game.
But an interesting situation I want to ask you about. Have you ever had that type of Shen Fiora hand where you just get a bunch of spells and no playable units?
Yeah, it happens sometimes. Sometimes you end up with like your, one of Ghost, one of Nopify, a couple of Rangers resolves and some buffs. Or you end up with like triple rally hands. It's like, oh, well, I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to do with this. But for the most part, you're mulling for the units, and a lot of times you're hitting them. It feels like with this deck, it's not as much as like the Shen Fiora issues.
Hmm. I do see though something interesting that a lot of people do not play, and probably most people do not play. One of Nopify, of course, this is a tournament in which you do not have no bans, so I need to ask you, What did you try to tech against with the one of Nopify?
I think Notify is just really good right now, especially into the PNC Noxus lists. You know, you can keep damage off of your units, which kind of breaks the flock and the scorched earth in their hands, which can be really important when you're pushing lethal. You know, just like nopifying, you know, a Get Excited or something. In the Plunder matchups, it actually came up huge against Monster Harpoon, or like a Make It Rain. It can be pretty big. I think the only other like non-standard card I'm running is like Laurent Protege. That's kind of how you can tell when someone net decked me versus net decking someone else, because no one else is on Protege. And I think that that's really good for like the Zoe Nami matchup specifically, just having the challengers consistently, you know, not just the bird, but also having the proteges.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I don't know about DNA though, but on you, everyone that I'm playing has the Laurent Protege to be fair.
that's funny.
EU has this kind of control-driven mentality that I want to always be in control. I want to control how things work over the game, the trades, yada yada. I only see one of Navori Blade Scout into your deck, and for a deck that wants to go white pretty fast, pretty quick, why are we deciding to cut down to only one?
Um, you know, this deck kind of started out when I originally picked it up as basically said Lulu. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I kept trying, yeah, I kept playing the cards. I'm like, Blade Scout, I hate having this fucking card in my hand. Like, it doesn't do anything. Like, I play much more for controlling the board and then playing it as like a combo deck where I'm rallying and that's how I'm ending games, as opposed to just getting in a ton of elusive chip damage. Um, I think that the proteges really play into that, and I think that Poppy plays into that more. So like, I'm still holding on to one because it can be nice to have an extra one drop sometimes. It's elusive. It can do some things. But for the most part, if I could cut it, I mean, maybe it should be like a third twin or something. I don't like the card that much.
Mm-hmm. You said you prepared for Zoinami, you prepared for Plunder. None of that has been around. So when you saw the deck list of the competitors, were you not scared, but maybe afraid of going into any of the lineups or uncomfortable going into any of the decks
Yeah,
with
no,
this?
there was an incredible amount of plunder that I just who's played plunder in the last like 2 months, right? Like ever since seasonals, it doesn't feel like a list that anyone should actually be playing, but of course everyone brought it. Um, I was very worried about that. You know, with the decks that I brought, I was also worried about like Caitlyn Draven, but only one person brought that. So I don't know. The fight night meta was really weird this week.
I think we have seen a lot of plunder because, like you, they wanted to counter Zoe Navi because if they plunder consistently enough, they do not have any big swings. Like, it's one of the most consistent, I think, counters because most of the time you need Scorch, you need Guillotine, Vengeance, or Ruination, and only Scorch is being played in the meta. Maybe
Yeah.
sometime you get to silence their champions, but outside of that, not much. So being able to freeze them is an option.
Yeah, no, the freeze is pretty good. You know, and anytime that you're dropping like a leveled gangplank on curve, you know, you could be pretty happy. Plunder still does extremely strong things, and you know, with Azir Irelia being nerfed, I could definitely see people wanting to lean more in that direction. I was just kind of surprised to see it, honestly.
Hmm. I mean, I would have expectations that people would drop GP, for example, and maybe lean towards TF because it's better at controlling the early or better for controlling whiteboards. In this meta, we have quite a lot of whiteboards. Example right
For
here with
sure.
your deck.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Especially any of the, like the Vandal City decks. TF stock is really high right now. Um, so yeah, he's definitely a very strong champion.
Has TF ever been out of the loop? To be fair, since he appeared, I think he's been in the meta in any shape or form. At least one of the deck has been represented.
Yeah, and usually there's something, you know, he's a pretty strong champion, even after several nerfs since like his heyday in TFs. You know, he still finds his way in.
Hmm. I mean, it's a lot about the value that you get at that specific time when you play it, right? You get a white red card with maybe some kegs, then you clear the whole board. You are in a pickle, you just play blue card and you get some sort of a card. Someone is trying to killing you, you just stun them.
Yeah, no, TF is always good, right? And he kind of demands a response because you can't let him sit on the board. Everyone remembers, you know, if TF flips, the game's basically over. So, yeah, no, he just applies a lot of pressure and has a lot of value, even if he just, you know, specifically has his, you know, enter the battlefield effect.
Mhm. All right, but enough about TF, enough about this deck. Let's move forward to the last one. And we talked about it before the interview. If you are playing Noxus, first thing first, you add Draven, and then you can start deck building. But this deck has a twist though. You are not on this Caitlyn stock. You are more of an Ezreal guy. Why did you bring Draven Ezreal instead of Draven Caitlyn?
I tested a lot of Draven Caitlyn, um, and I just haven't had much success with it. Even with people like, Henneke is singing the praises of it. Alan is, Majin Bay is. A lot of people are all about Caitlyn. I just haven't had much success with it. The way that the deck plays out, it feels like it's really married to controlling the board 24/7. If you ever lose control of the board, you just kind of lose because you have no over the top. And I just kind of preferred Ezreal. I've just had a lot more success with it, and with the current meta with like Bandle City, healing isn't real. There is no healing in this meta. Um, so I think having the extra over the top damage, the extra reach, has just really paid off.
Hmm. I think you are one of the people that brought it to the top to the qualifier for Worlds, and you ran that one version with just one Ezreal, or did you run Ezreal as well? Just Ezreal.
So it's just three Ezreal.
Hmm.
Um, I think that I was one of two people to qualify for top 16 with the Ezreal version. Um, but yeah, no, I've just had more success with it. I'm more comfortable on it. And it's paid off for me, right? If I'm doing well with it, I'm not gonna cut him, right?
Hmm. Why do you think the Caitlyn version didn't work out for you, or why do you hate it, or not
I
hate it?
think a
Dislike.
lot of it is just the lack of over the top, right? Like, if we look at like Alan's list that he was playing in the qualifier, he was like completely off of Mystic shots. And he's playing like some fumes instead. And some fumes is great, but it can't go phase. Um, and I think that having the extra burn, having the extra reach is really nice within the meta. Maybe it's just I feel like the Caitlyn deck, even though it shares like 33 of the same cards, I think that it plays out very differently. And it hasn't really fit my playstyle as much. Obviously it's a very good deck because a lot of people have been having a ton of success with it. It just hasn't been my deck.
Hmm. All right. This version, I think it looks pretty standard. How does Lost Soul do in this deck? You said they share some of the similarities. I think both of the decks really pile up on this Lost Soul infinite value, kind of.
Yeah, no, Last Soul's kind of a really good card. In the qualifiers, I was on like two Farron and two Lost Soul, and every time I drew Farron, I was like, okay, this card kind of sucks. It's not really doing anything in the current meta. But Lost Soul's kind of broken. Um, just the infinite value, the ability to grind out matchups that you normally shouldn't be able to grind out, just because you have the infinite value engine. I know that Plunder last season was not a favorable matchup for Draven Ezreal. It was like 45 at best, and if they draw well, then you're just kind of fucked. But Fight Night, I kind of farmed the matchup, and a lot of it was through just Lost Soul, consistently getting damage down, consistently just having units, having blockers. It's just an incredibly valuable card. It's kind of insane.
Hmm. Something I'm surprised to see is actually Thorn of the Rose. In this meta, when everyone is poking you with a stick, you're still playing Thorn of the Rose.
Yeah, so Thorn's pretty good into like Scion because you get the Guile. It's pretty good into Demacia piles. So like I was expecting some Poppy, there was no Poppy, but I was expecting it, and I think that specifically into Demacia and stuff, the decks that Thorn is good into, Thorn is incredibly good. But there's so many pokes. There's so many like pings, make it rain or pokey stick or there's just so many things that really make Thorn feel bad. Um, but yeah, no, I'm still just on it because in the matchups where it's good, it's just incredibly good.
Hmm. Look, Travelers, I see you're running this card too, and has been the talk. Like everything in Bender City has been talk of the town, so I'm not gonna ask you how broken this card is, but if you got any interesting discards out of a Look Travelers throughout your games.
Nothing too crazy. It's nice to hit like the Bandle trees. It's nice to hit, especially against Plunder. They have so many like big things to hit. The Dreadway, the Sejuani, and just the information you get off of the cards can be pretty valuable. In the mirrors especially, if you can avoid Lost Soul, if you hit Lost
Hmm.
Soul with it, it kind of sucks. But if you avoid Lost Soul, then it's hitting like Tri-Beams, it's hitting, potentially Scion in the Scion decks. There's a lot of really valuable targets. It's pretty good, pretty okay.
Speaking of mirrors, did you actually get to face any Draven PNZ versus Draven PNZ mirror? If not in the
Um,
tournament, throughout playing the game.
well, I mean, I've of course played it several times. Within Fight Night specifically, I think I avoided it. But yeah, no, I've played a lot of PNZ Nox versus PNZ Nox.
What would be the winning lines and the key to winning those? Because it's a value fiesta, right? Everyone is playing Lost Souls everywhere. You drop a Lost Soul, I drop a Lost Soul. Usually they deck out if they run out of burn.
Yeah, no, it's a mess. I mean, since I'm on the triple Lost Soul, um, usually Caitlyn's pretty favored into Ezreal because if you're playing Farron and they're playing Lost Souls for like 6 turns, usually you aren't doing that great. Um, but since I'm on the Lost Souls, usually you can try to outvalue and hope that you burn through enough of their removal to maybe play an Ezreal, or like maybe you just threw more Tri-Beams than them. It can be a bit of a clusterfuck, but you just hope that your removal lines up just a little bit better than theirs. Oftentimes, is what it comes down to.
Technically, your version should be better, right? Because as you said, Ezreal is some on top value, and Caitlyn is just good at controlling the board. So with Ezreal, you can try to finish the game faster, and they need to have the answers. If not, well, tough luck.
I think it really depends. If you hit Draven on 3, then you're probably fine. But the issue is that the Draven Caitlyn deck has more consistent, strong level 3 plays, right? Because they're running 6 champions at level 3, or at turn 3, that 3 costs,
Hmm.
right? Um, so it can be kind of difficult if they hit Draven or Caitlyn and you don't, then you're kind of behind on board. But if you're hitting Draven, then yeah, Ezreal can be great.
Did you actually manage to see? I think Rubin has been testing out and has been going on a wild one on a night with that Draven Ezreal burn. Have you seen the list? Have you tested it?
Yeah, no, I ran into it on his way up. I ran into it and I'm like, oh, it's Draven Ezreal. So I mulliganed for Draven Ezreal. And then I'm taking like 5 damage on turn 1, and by turn 3 I'm at like 10 health. I have no board. I just traded down everything, and then he just fucking decimates me, and I'm like, wait, come on, this isn't the Draven Ezreal deck. Yeah, no, I've ran into it a couple times. It's kind of cheesy. I don't know if in like an open deck list it would be as good, but because it fucks with your mulligans and makes it really difficult to play into, it can definitely catch you off guard. And obviously Ruben played it very well. He hit rank 1 with it. He went on a pretty good run.
Hmm. Well, you can probably use it on ladder because everyone knows you as that Draven Ezreal guy that plays more control, and then you decide to switch to that one, and people do not expect it.
Yeah, exactly. You keeping people honest. Half of my games are with the burn version, half of my games are with the regular version. Just got to get that edge.
Yeah, that would be fun. But yeah, you have brought this Draven pile, you have brought the Demacia, the Poppy Lulu. So what did we try to target specifically with the lineup as a whole, or what did we try to defend our lineup against?
So a lot of it was just trying to be really good into Nami Zoe. I kind of hate the idea of banning Nami Zoe. I want to be really good into it, and I think that these decks can pretty consistently deal with it. Poppy just like rallies on turn 4, rallies on turn 5, and just destroys them. And Draven Ezreal has enough removal that usually you're pretty favored into it. Um, Other than that, like there's definitely some bad matchups that I could run into. I don't think that either of my decks are particularly good into like Scion. Um, but for the most part, I was feeling pretty comfortable into Nami Zoe, Bandle Tree, stuff like that.
Hmm. You said what you prepared against, but when you actually saw the list and when you actually saw who you are playing against, did any lineup surprise you, or did any deck surprise you when you saw it?
I mean, so much of the plunder. Do you mean specifically at Fight Night?
Yes.
Yeah, no, so much of the plunder was very so I thought that like the Poppy deck would have trouble with plunder. So with Cameron Hanso, we spent like, 2 hours before fight night just scrimming the matchup, and I won like 8 times in a row, and I'm like, oh well, maybe this is actually a good matchup, which I don't think I ended up losing it once at fight night, so maybe it is just a good matchup. But I was definitely scared of plunder.
Hmm. it maybe they did not hit their make it trades in time, or usually if they do not hit your early removal, your board grows, right? And on turn 3,
Yeah.
your units are already 3 HP plus, and then it's getting harder to deal with them.
Yeah, the big thing is, I'm on two Rangers resolves, so a lot of times I'm beating out Make It Rain, and then Nopify hitting the discounted Harpoon is actually really massive. There were a couple times where they're trying to harpoon my Poppy on curve or harpooning Lulu on a big attack, and I just have the Nopify ready. I was drawing really well. Um, but yeah, usually Demacia piles don't have fun with a leveled Sejuani, but this Poppy deck's just fast enough that it wasn't an issue.
I mean, they need to reach turn 6 first.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And ideally, I'm not letting them reach turn 6.
Ideally. But yeah, you won Fight Night and you're qualified for Worlds. So let's drive a little bit to your Worlds qualification. How did you feel when you first realized, alright, I'm a top 16 Worlds player?
I mean, it was a miracle that I qualified for the world's qualifications, like the top 64. I had to top four the seasonals, and I was going into the seasonals like I'm not gonna top four, like I'm not good enough. I just won't be able to do it. But then I magically hit top cut, and it's like okay, well I hit top cut, but I'm not gonna do any better than this. And then I just kind of high rolled my way and got second place. And at that point I was like, shit, I actually made worlds. So, I go into the top 64. I was pretty happy with that to begin with. I'm like, okay, well, I'm probably going to get knocked out pretty quickly. And, sometimes you just come in pretty hot. And, I made it. It, it feels amazing. I just never expected to get this far at all. I've been playing this game for like 6 months. I would have never expected to actually reach Worlds. I remember when I first started, they announced Worlds, and I was like, "Oh, that'd be really cool if I could make it there." But it's not really a realistic goal, and it's a miracle that I've made it this far.
hmm I mean, you say happily that you high rolled your way, but how much of that is high roll and how much of that is actually preparation and consistency?
It's a combination of the both. Anyone who has done anything in LOR will tell you that in order to do well at a tournament, you have to have good preparation. You have to be incredibly good at the game. And then it's a combination of playing extremely well and being extremely lucky on the day. And I've just kind of been really hitting that combination recently, where I'm getting the right cards when I need them. There were a couple times in my seasonal run where it's like, we're just praying for that top deck Mystic shot for lethal, and we hit it. Um, so it's definitely a combination of factors. I am, I'm playing well, I'm practicing well, but also I'm getting pretty lucky.
Mm. Well, it all lines up. You mentioned that you're playing for that one of Mystic Shot, and I think a lot of people do not realize that they need to play for their outs. Some of the people
Yeah,
just drop the game really fast when they see that they are in a shitty situation, but you have an answer, not an answer, a threat that can end the game. Just play to that. If you're losing anyways.
yeah, exactly. You have to be able to identify, if you're gonna win this game, what does winning this game look like, and then just playing to that out. Um, yeah,
Like I'm a burn player, so I always hope for that decimate over the top or that
yeah,
purple.
exactly.
All right. Well, it's been fun, but did you? What are your expectations going into Worlds? Maybe in terms of lineups. Of course, I think they are published. People have announced it on Twitter. I'm not sure if it's official or not, so we're going to stay away from that. But what would have been your expectations in terms of lineups when you prepared yours?
I think that most people are, you, either you're bringing Nami Zoe or you have an answer for Nami Zoe. That's sort of the deck that everyone needs to, build their lineup with that in mind. That plus, some sort of a Draven list is kind of the basis for I think um, a lot of lineups. So yeah, I think that being aware of that, making sure that you have a plan for Nami Zoe, and then being able to either ban or play into the PNZ Noxus lists.
What's the strongest fourth deck then, in your opinion, or what's the strongest deck to be a contender for? What are the strongest? Because there are more options to be the fourth deck.
For third deck, it's hard to say. It really comes down to what you're trying to do with your lineup. In terms of like pure power level. Any sort of a poppy decks are pretty good right now. Whether that's the Ionia version or just the Bandle City version, I think the Bandle City versions are probably what a lot of people will be on. Tree is has potential. I think that Real Key um, qualified with like triple tree in Worlds. So I mean the deck's pretty okay. Um, that or like there's a new TF Gangplank Bandle City burn deck that's come up. That's pretty good. There's a lot of contenders I think for like what the third best deck might be. And I think most of it just comes down to what you're trying to do with your lineup.
Mm-hmm. But we also got the groups revealed. So in your group, do you have anyone that you're actually scared of or might not feel comfortable facing? Or is everyone just the same? If you beat them, you beat them.
I mean, at this level, everybody is incredibly good at the game, right? Like, there's no slouches. You don't accidentally make it to Worlds, right? Like, all these players are incredibly good. I know Ping Ping Ho is someone that people have been talking about as, being potentially really difficult to deal with, and I'm definitely worried about that. I think Cosimo is also in my group. It's definitely not going to be easy. Um, definitely not going to be easy.
I mean, on the Asian Southeast Asia side, people tend to be creative, and that might meddle with the other opponents because on Europe, on the Americas, people are used to play against the strongest decks, the optimized decks, something that is meta defining or that is countering the meta. But then there comes in Asia and Southeast Asia where people are on a wild one. They are trying different decks. They're really putting a different light onto some of the decks. Like I remember one of the times since you mentioned Ping Ping Ho, I think he brought, I'm not sure if to top 8, but for sure top 42, um, a Sandisk deck. An Allegiance
Oh
Sandisk
jeez.
Shurima deck.
Oh my God. I mean, yeah, I think that it's hard because Southeast Asia and the Asia servers don't have as much coverage. It feels like in the West in terms of like the seasonals themselves or a lot of their tournaments. It can be kind of difficult to watch them, and it feels like it's sort of segregated as far as like the meta is. Whereas EU and NA. There's a lot of EU players that play on NA. There's a lot of NA players that play on EU. It feels like we have very similar metas, right? If a big deck comes up on NA, it's going to end up being played on EU within like 24 hours, right? It feels like we've done a lot of testing together, so it's much easier to know what's going on as opposed to a lot of the Asian servers is just not as much so. So it's kind of a wild card. It's kind of hard to say. Maybe they just have a completely different read on the meta, and maybe theirs is right. Maybe we're just not on the right decks. Maybe they're identifying something as being better, and it's definitely something to worry about.
I mean, I definitely expect a lot of the EU and the Americas people queue into one of these players and be like, what the hell are these decks and what is this lineup supposed to do and how am I
Yeah,
banning?
potentially, man. I mean, I you know I've seen what the people in my group brought, and all I can say is there's definitely some stuff I'm like, dude, I would never have expected this. It's gonna be wild. Um, there's some rough matchups coming up, I think.
You know what you should have done? Not meet Cameron that early. Meet him in the last round, make him drop to the lower bracket, and then let him win, and then be in that group with the two Americas players and farm him.
True. If I don't do well at Worlds, at like the top 16, it's because Cameron wasn't here. Obviously I need Cameron in order to actually do well in a tournament. If he's not there, then what am I even gonna do? So yeah, I think it's on him, frankly. He should have made it through the losers bracket and made it to Worlds. That way I could win.
And meet in the final as well.
Exactly, exactly.
All right, it has been a pleasure. We are mentioning a lot of these names, so I'm really curious because you mentioned some of the names in the beginning. Who did you actually practice with? If not for Fight Night in general, for Worlds, who are you practicing with? Who are your partners?
Right, the big people, Grandpa Roji, the guy who's known for making the Malphite Talia deck and hitting rank 2 with it. He's cracked on so many different decks. He's a great sprint partner. Cameron Hanso, of course. He's insane at thralls and can play quite a few other things too, as well as duckling. It's nice to be able to scrim with a seasonals champion, and especially with the prep for seasonals, wouldn't have been able to do as well as I did without him. So that's kind of been the core.
Hmm. Any other smaller names, because you can give them a shout out now if they are
Yeah,
not
for
on the
sure.
main stage.
you know, uh, been scrimming over time with Doughy Nut. He streams sometimes. Maybe next time, been scrimming with him as well, and it definitely helped out.
Mm-hmm. All right. If you have seen the interviews, you know that we have one more question before I'm letting you off the hook, and that would be, if you had to say only one thing to the audience that is now watching, which one would that be?
I just appreciate all the people who have supported me up to this point. I hope that at Worlds, I don't disappoint anyone who's hoping I do well, right?
All right. So I'm a champion of the people nonetheless. Thank you for being around. Thank you for accepting this invitation. And thank you guys for watching, because this has been a pleasure and I hope you're going to enjoy the interview. And coming up next, I think, is going to be the World Champion interview itself. But until then, I'm going to let you with this one. Thank you, Aikado, for being around. See you guys next time.